You know how every Souls-like these days has you creeping through some crumbling cathedral, sword and shield in hand, learning boss patterns one death at a time? It's a formula I love, but after a while you start wondering what else the genre can do. And then a trailer drops that swaps the cathedral for a burning frontier town and the sword for a lever-action rifle. That's Guns of Eschaton, among the first slew of Souls-like FPS that kind of seem to appear out of nowhere. It's set in a version of the American West that's been swallowed up by the occult. So about a week ago, publisher for Divinity and developer Eschatology Entertainment dropped a proper gameplay demo for Guns of Eschaton, and I've been picking through it frame by frame ever since. The studio itself is based in Cyprus and was founded back in 2022, which means they've had a solid few years to build this before showing anything publicly. That's not always the case with new IPs. A lot of studios rush to announce with nothing but a CG trailer, a picture of a random eyeball, and a logo. These guys showed up with actual gameplay, and from the looks of it, it's got the juice. The premise is that you're a multi-arm gunslinger. Basically, you got 4 arms, and each arm grips a different firearm, and you make your way through a dying version of 19th century America. This isn't the Wild West you've seen in 1,000 other games. The frontier towns are collapsing due to a sort of supernatural infection, with enemies that look like they crawl out of some Lovecraftian cosmic horror. It's coming to basically every current-gen console, including PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and obviously PC, with full solo and co-op support where you keep your progression regardless of how you play. That last part is worth noting because a lot of games with optional co-op treat it as a side mode, where your solo character and your co-op character are separate things. Here, it sounds like you can hop between solo and co-op freely without losing progress, which is how more games should handle it in my opinion. Now, there's no release window yet, and I'll get to what I think about that later, but the thing that hit me first wasn't the gameplay or the co-op, or even any of the mechanics. It was the name attached to the project, Viktor Antonov. If you've played FPSs for any length of time, you've probably walked through worlds that Viktor Antonov designed, whether you knew his name or not. He was the art director in Half-Life 2, which means he's the reason City 17 feels the way it does. That sort of oppressive Eastern European architecture repurposed by aliens, the cold blues and the grey palette, the sense that you're walking through a place that was once lived in and is now just basically processed by those aliens. Everything about that game's visual identity passed through his hands. Then he moved on to Arcane and did the same thing for Dishonored. Dunwall, with its whale-oiled machinery and crumbling Victorian structures, is one of the most incredible fictional cities ever built in a game. Every street corner felt like it belonged to the same world. He also contributed to Prey, and if you look at Talos 1, the Art Deco space station carries the same DNA. A place that feels real, lived in, functional, right up until something deeply wrong starts seeping in through the walls. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2025, which means represents the last original universe he ever helped create. The studio head even said that Antonov had been involved from the earliest stages of development, working directly on the themes and concepts as well as the visual direction. So this was his world too, and you can see it in the footage. The frontier towns aren't just brown and dusty the way most Western games handle things. There's this sickly quality to the light, almost like the sky itself is infected. The architecture feels grounded with wooden storefronts, saloon doors, dirt roads, but then you notice these impossible structures in the distance, silhouettes that don't belong to any real 19th century America. Kinda reminds me of walking through Yharnam in Bloodborne, where the city starts out like a gothic London knockoff and then slowly peels away into something far worse the deeper you go. I bring all this up because a lot of new IPs get announced with big promises about their world and their lore and their unique setting, and most of the time it doesn't amount to anything you remember a week later. And that's a whole different story when you're talking about the person that helped build the world of City 17 in Dunwall. I'm not saying the game will be good because of one name. Plenty of talented people have been attached to projects that didn't land. What I am saying is that the world of this game has something already behind it, which a lot of other IPs would kill for. So what does it play like? The gameplay demo runs about 3.5 minutes and it packs a lot into that runtime. Like I said before, this is an FPS Souls-like, so the pacing is way closer to a Souls game than to any shooter you're used to. Combat is built around making every shot count, with your character holding multiple firearms, revolvers, lever-action rifles, and what looks like a break-action shotgun, and each one fires specialized ammunition types. No spray and pray here. You have to pick your shots the way you'd pick when you had to swing a greatsword in Dark Souls, for example. In a third-person Souls-like, you commit to an animation and you're usually locked in for its duration, and that's what creates the whole risk-reward system that we've all grown to love. Here, that same principle applies to aiming and firing. If you miss a shot, you open up a window of vulnerability. The reload animations are slow and deliberate. the kind where you can almost feel the character thumbing each cartridge into place while something with too many teeth is closing distance. On the defensive side, you got a parry and a dash. The parry timing looks tighter than what you'd find in something like The Surge or even Lords of the Fallen. It reminds me of Sekiro's deflect window, where you kinda had to read the enemy's wind-up instead of reacting on reflex. The dash serves the same purpose as a roll in Dark Souls, but because this is first person and you're dealing with bullets coming at you from multiple angles, the positioning matters differently. You can't just iframe through an attack and come out swinging. You have to dash to a better position, reacquire your target, and line up the shot before they close in again. It's a different kind of tension from the circling and waiting rhythm of melee Soulslikes. Then there's the whole build crafting layer, which is a lot more involved than I expected. You can equip different armor pieces, talismans, and consumables, and there's a full active and passive ability system that lets you shape your playstyle. Want to lean into being a parry god? There are abilities that reward that. Want to play more like a trapper, using consumables and positioning to control space before you engage? That's supported too. It's not quite at the level of something like Neo 2's build system where you're stacking set bonuses and synergies, but it definitely looks like it's heading in that direction. The Codex system helps with expanding on combat too. Once you engage an enemy, you can study them through the Codex to learn their weaknesses. And if you don't, you're going in blind against something that will probably mess you up. This is the part that reminds me of The Witcher 3's bestiary, but without the hand-holding. In The Witcher, the bestiary tells you exactly what oil to apply and what sign to cast, and you just follow the recipe. From what the demo shows, the Codex in Eschaton gives you information you have to interpret and apply yourself. You can learn that an enemy type is vulnerable to a specific kind of ammunition, and then you actually have to land those shots under pressure for that knowledge to matter. Preparation gives you an edge, but it doesn't win the fight for you. You actually have to get good. Ammo scarcity is also a big part of the equation too. The demo shows the player swapping ammo types mid-combat and clearly running low at some points. If the full game follows through on this, I'd put it close to something like Hunt Showdown in terms of how you think about each bullet. In a hunt, every shot reveals your position to every other player on the map, so you don't fire unless you mean it. Here they seem to be creating a similar weight behind each pull of the trigger, but for different reasons. Now all of that sounds great on paper, but there's a question hanging over the whole thing that I can't shake. Can Souls-like FPSs really work? The Souls-like genre has spent 15 years refining a very specific rhythm, and that rhythm is built around melee combat. You learn the boss's attack patterns, you find your window, and you deal with the consequences. That commitment, the feeling that you can't take back what you just did, is what gives the combat its weight. First-person shooters are, well, twitchier. You aim, you click, the hit registers instantly, there's no wind-up, no recovery frames, no animation lock. The distance between deciding to attack and the attack landing is measured in milliseconds. Here they're kind of trying to stretch it out through reload times, ammo management, and how you handle each one of your weapons. The gunplay itself doesn't look like Doom Eternal or anything like that, where you're weapon swapping at 100 miles an hour and every kill refills your health or your ammo. It doesn't look like Destiny either, where the gunplay is crisp and fast and your abilities are on short cooldowns. It looks more like a hunting simulator, but instead of deer, you're hunting down eldritch horrors and biblically accurate angels. That's a specific choice, and I think that's the right one for what they're trying to do, but it also means the entire game lives or dies on whether the guns feel right. I keep coming back to Remnant and Remnant 2 as the closest comparison, because those games already proved you can blend Souls-like progression and boss design with gunplay. But those games are third person, which changes the feel more than you'd think. In third person, you have spatial awareness. You can see your character's position relative to the enemy, you can track multiple threats in your peripheral vision, and the camera gives you information your character wouldn't normally have. In first person, you lose all of that. When you're aiming down sights at one enemy, you can't see the second one flanking you until it's already in your face. That's scary in a horror game, but in a Souls-like, where every death costs you resources and progress and, well, time, it can tip from tense into frustrating very quickly. The parry system is where I'm most curious to see how it translates. In Sekiro, the entire combat system is built around the clashing rhythm of deflect, attack, deflect, attack. It's almost musical once you lock in. Translating that to a first-person parry means you're reacting to visual tells from an enemy's weapon or body language. But you don't have the full body view that a third-person camera gives you. You gotta read a much smaller slice of animation. From the demo, the parry looks like a gun deflection. You knock their weapon aside with your own firearm and create an opening for a countershot. The timing window seems generous enough, but this is the kind of thing that has to feel perfect. If the parry window's too tight, every fight becomes a gamble. Too loose, and you might as well be playing one of the new Assassin's Creed games. And in a Souls-like, that tiny difference matters more than anything else, because these games live or die by feel. I said the same thing when I was talking about Lords of the Fallen 2's combat improvements. A 10% improvement in responsiveness can feel like 50% when you're the one holding the controller. The opposite is true too. A parry that's off by a few frames doesn't feel like a minor tuning issue, it feels like the game cheated you. I just hope we can get our hands on a playable build sometime soon. So after watching the demo multiple times and sitting with everything they've shown, here's where I land. I'm slightly optimistic, as I am with most Souls-likes that don't look like asset flips, which is about as far as I'll go for a game that doesn't have a release window and hasn't had any hands-on previews yet. The concept is genuinely interesting in a space that's getting crowded with samey melee Souls-likes, and the Antonov legacy gives it an artistic weight that most new IPs simply don't carry. The studio has been working on it for over 4 years, so that gives them plenty of room to cook. Now there are a few things that make me lean more on the positive side. The build crafting system looks a lot deeper than I expected, and the Codex system adds another layer of tactical prep that helps players do their homework. And the commitment to making ammo scarce enough that you actually have to think about each shot is pretty cool. The enemy designs shown so far have that classic Antonov stamp. You know, the kind of creature design that makes you stop and stare before you remember you're supposed to be shooting it in the face. There are a few things that keep me from getting fully on board though. The Reddit reactions to the demo have been mixed, with some people pointing out that the enemy AI looked a bit stiff in the footage shown. A few people mentioned that the field of view felt a bit cramped and the gun placement being a little awkward in first person. Those little details are exactly the kinds of things that can sink a game like this if they're not addressed, because when your entire pitch is Souls-like but in first person, that first person experience has to be flawless. You can't have players fighting the camera when they're also fighting a bunch of enemies. I think the smartest thing Eschaton can do is release a demo or a beta well before launch, let people actually feel the parry timing and the gun handling and the ammo economy for themselves. Because no amount of trailer analysis can answer the question that matters most: does it feel right? If they're confident enough in the field to put a slice of it in players' hands, that confidence would say more than any gameplay showcase ever could. And to be honest, I want this to be good. A Western Souls-like FPS with Viktor Antonov's visual footprints all over it, that's the kind of game that doesn't come around often, and when it works, it creates a niche that nobody else is filling. So what do you think? Is a Souls-like FPS something you'd actually play? Or does a first-person perspective break the formula for you? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and obviously subscribe. Helps a ton. Thanks again for watching the whole way through, and I'll see you next time. Have a great one.